You've got 6 dashboards, 3 vendors, and a color-coded incident spreadsheet. Congrats, you built a Rube Goldberg machine that alerts loudly and catches little. Hybrid security isn't more tools. It's 2 overlapping attack surfaces pretending to be one. Here's what most people miss. Your silos hide 4 blind spots: M365, endpoints, identities, and cloud apps. I'll show you how attackers live in those gaps and how Defender XDR closes them by turning chaos into a single incident story. There's one capability that flips Defender XDR from expense to savings. Hold that thought. First, let's talk about why the silo habit keeps burning you. Why siloed security fails in hybrid environments. Foundation. Hybrid isn't new. It's just messier. You've got on-prem AD still limping along, Azure AD doing the real work, laptops phoning in from questionable Wi-Fi, and SaaS apps approved by someone who swears they ask security. That's 4 lanes of traffic, no stoplights, and you're shocked there are collisions. Now the part nobody likes to say out loud. Every separate tool creates context debt. Email sees a fish, identity flags an odd sign-in. Endpoint notices a weird PowerShell chain. Cloud app security waves at a rogue OAuth consent. Individually, they look low. Together, it's an active intrusion, but your tools don't share memory, so your team becomes the RAM, copying, pasting, reconciling timestamps, guessing which alert came first. That's where dwell time blooms. Alert fatigue isn't a feeling, it's a tax. When your SOC pivots between consoles, you multiply toil. Analysts burn cycles correlating what should already be fused. Sender to user to token to device to app. That manual stitching? Slow, inconsistent, and easy to get wrong at 2 a.m. The attacker needs one gap. You hand them 4. You think the fix is more data. No, the fix is one timeline. Siloed tools are great at telling you something happened. They're terrible at telling you what happened in which order across domains. Sequence is the detection. Without it, you're left with vibes and a backlog. Here's the financial part. Fragmentation inflates response time, which inflates blast radius, which inflates cost. Meanwhile, compliance turns into scavenger hunt theater, exporting CSVs from 5 places to prove you did anything. That's not security. That's paperwork. Everything clicked for me when I realized we aren't under-resourced. We're over-fragmented. You don't need another console. You need one incident graph that understands relationships. The mailbox rule that hid the fish. The consent grant that gave persistence. The token that bypassed MFA. The endpoint process that pulled payloads. And the cloud session that exfiltrated data, all tied to the same user and device, end to end. Now you might say, we have smart analysts. Sure. So does the attacker, and they aren't reconciling your alert IDs. They're moving laterally while you argue over which timestamp is UTC. Back in my day, Exchange 2003 taught us about hidden rules the hard way. Today it's the same trick with better marketing. OAuth consent instead of COM add-ins. Different sticker, same mess. Market reality reflects this. XDR didn't show up because vendors needed a new acronym. It showed up because multi-tool correlation failed at human speed. Organizations learned the hard way that you can't manually glue identities, email, endpoints, and cloud apps and expect real-time detection. The growth in XDR adoption isn't hype. It's the penalty for ignoring causality. Here's the weird part. Siloed teams mirror siloed tools. Email team quarantines a message and moves on. Identity team lowers a risk state and moves on. Endpoint team clears an alert and moves on. Nobody owns the narrative. So the incident survives because the system that should be telling the story doesn't write one. What this actually means day to day, your containment isn't. You pulled the email but left the token alive. You cleaned the device but left the OAuth grant intact. You reset the password but kept the malicious mailbox rule. That's how reinfection loops happen. You feel haunted because you are by artifacts you never saw in one place. Defender XDR treats hybrid as one organism. Not perfect, but closer to the truth. It fuses signals from Microsoft 365, identity endpoints and cloud apps into a single incident with a causal chain. Okay, so basically it stops making you be the bus. The platform does the stitching, presents the sequence, and this is key, executes response across domains from the same pane. Auto IR isn't magic. It's policy-driven muscle memory you wish your tier 1s had at 3 a.m. Think of siloed security like guarding a building with 4 doormen who never speak. Each sees a piece. A forged ID, a propped door, a delivery to the wrong floor, a badge swipe at midnight. None of them calls it in because each event alone is meh. An XDR is the radio net and the floor plan. Suddenly it's obvious there's an intruder on level 3 and you lock the elevators. Here's what most people miss. The cost of tooling is visible. The cost of correlation isn't. Until the breach report. You pay for dwell time, for overtime, for audits, for missed detections. Then you pay again to rip and replace. Or you consolidate the story up front. We'll get into the 4 blind spots next. M365, Identities, Endpoints, and Cloud Apps. And I'll show you where attackers live rent-free and how Defender XDR evicts them by default. And yes, that expense to savings switch, it turns on when incidents finally have one timeline. Blind spot 1. Microsoft 365, email and collaboration telemetry without identity fusion. Let's start where most break-ins still begin. Mail and collaboration. Phish lands, user clicks. You quarantine the message and pat yourself on the back. Except nothing meaningful changed. Because the blast moved from the mailbox to identity the moment the user handed over a token. Email is the door, the keys are elsewhere. Here's what most people miss. Microsoft 365 throws off great telemetry, delivery events, safe links verdicts, mailbox rule changes, Teams file shares. Useful, but in a silo it's just noise. You see Phish delivered to 5 users, you yank it and declare containment. Meanwhile, one user consented to Calendar Assistant Pro that wants read right across graph. The mailbox is quiet, but the attacker is now living on OAuth. Quarantine isn't containment, it's house cleaning after the thief left with your badge. Okay, so basically the simple version is you need the email story stitched to the sign-in story and the device story. Defender XDR builds one incident out of that mess. The Phish that hit Outlook, it shows up on the same timeline as the Azure AD sign-in spike, the token issuance, the endpoint spawning a suspicious Office child process, and the cloud app session that started scraping files. Same user, same device. One causal chain instead of 4 unrelated lows. Here's the weird part. In a classic setup, the mailbox team kills the message but never sees that the account's refresh token is still valid. Identity flags, risky sign-in, lowers it after a password reset and calls it a day. Endpoint removes a macro dropper but has no clue the user's inbox now forwards invoices to an external Gmail via a hidden rule. You just built a reinfection loop. Clean device, dirty identity, and vice versa. Defender XDR stops that loop because response spans domains. Auto IR can isolate the device that ran the unsigned Office PowerShell chain, revoke the user's active sessions and tokens, kill the malicious OAuth consent, and roll back mailbox rules without you playing swivel chair. Policy bound, with approvals where you want them, but fast. The analyst clicks into the incident, sees the process tree, the email header, the sign-in IPs, the consent details, and the file activity. It's not magic. It's a single memory of what happened. Think of it like this. Email-only tools are bouncers who throw out the flyer, not the guy who already slipped inside. XDR is the radio call that locks the stairwell, checks badges on the 3rd floor, and clears the roof. Same event, different outcome because sequence and scope are known. ROI isn't hand-wavy here. When email, identity, and endpoint are fused, false positives drop because weird email without weird login stays a low. Triage time shrinks because you aren't guessing which alert came first. Audits stop being scavenger hunts because the incident record already shows mailbox actions, token revocations, and device containment with timestamps. Microstory: you've lived, quarantined fish, but the token lived. User keeps getting hit. You rotate passwords, wipe the laptop, and the unknown app still hoovers mail via graph. With Defender XDR, the same incident flags the consent, shows who granted it, and offers one-click revoke plus session kill. Session dies, persistence dies, device isolates if needed. The ghost stops knocking. Email is the door, sure, but without identity fusion and endpoint context, you're guarding the foyer while the data walks out the loading dock. Defender XDR ties the handles together and locks the loading dock too. Blind spot 2. Identities, AAD signals without endpoint and app context. Identities are the keys, and attackers don't brute force the lock anymore. They borrow the keys and make copies. Consent grants, token theft, MFA fatigue. Quiet, durable, annoying to unwind if you only stare at Azure AD risk. Here's what most people miss. Azure AD will dutifully flag risky sign-ins. Impossible travel, new device, anonymous IP. Useful, but alone it's half a sentence. Was the device healthy? Did Office spawn PowerShell? Did a productivity app just get graph read right from the same account? In a silo, you reset a password and pat yourself on the back. Except refresh tokens live, OAuth consent lives, and the attacker lives right along with them. Okay, so basically, the simple version is identity without endpoint and app context lies to you. You see user risk lowered, but you didn't kill active sessions. You see MFA satisfied, but the token was stolen from a compromised device that still runs unsigned binaries at Logon. You see new app consented, but you don't tie it to yesterday's fish that dropped a malicious COM add-in. You get the picture. Clean score. Dirty reality. Defender XDR fuses the streams so the identity story finally has a plot. A risky sign-in isn't just a blip, it's stitched to device posture, process lineage, and cloud app behavior. The same incident shows suspicious token issuance, the endpoint that handled it, the process tree that harvested the browser cookie, and the OAuth app that immediately started scraping SharePoint. One timeline, one user, one device, no guessing. Here's the weird part. Most orgs try to fix identity by tightening conditional access and calling it a day. Good, except it's a gate, not a cleanup crew. If the token's already minted, policy changes are future-facing. The mess is present tense. Defender XDR closes the gap with automatic token revocation, session invalidation, and, when policy allows, device isolation, all from the same incident pane. You don't pray the sign-in risk drops. You force it to by removing the attacker's oxygen. Specific example. You get impossible travel at 0214 and a Windows device executes an unsigned binary at 0216 tied to the same user context. In a silo, 2 consoles, 2 teams, endless slack. With XDR, those correlate instantly. Auto-IR can revoke the refresh token, kill active sessions, mark the user risky, suggest conditional access hardening, and contain the device pending review. The mailbox rules and OAuth consents tied to that account appear in the same view. You clear persistence in one pass, not 3. Think of identity-only tools like a security guard watching badge swipes on a screen. Useful. But if they never see the camera feed from the stairwell or the shipping dock logs, they'll keep waving through a cloned badge. Defender XDR is the shared feed plus the intercom. You see the badge clone, the stairwell movement, and the door wedge on level 4, and you lock the doors in the right order. ROI shows up as fewer wild goose chases. A lone, risky sign-in that doesn't correlate to device anomalies stays low, quietly auto-resolved. A real blast. Risky sign-in plus browser token theft plus suspicious OAuth activity jumps to the top, already packaged with recommended actions. Fewer tickets, shorter timelines, clean evidence for audits without exporting half the tenant. You don't solve identity by yelling at users about MFA. You solve it by collapsing identity, device, and app into one narrative and cutting power to the attacker's session, not just changing the password. That's the Identity Fusion Defender XDR forces, and it stops the reinfection loop cold. Blind spot 3. Endpoints. EDR events without SaaS and identity context. Endpoints are where the mess gets loud. Ransomware, LOL bins, unsigned binaries doing yoga at startup. EDR is good at that noise. But here's the catch. An endpoint can look clean, while the identity and SaaS layer are filthy. You reinstall Windows. The attacker keeps the refresh token and the OAuth foothold. You start the loop again next Tuesday. Okay, so basically, processes don't tell the whole story. EDR sees command prompt spawning PowerShell touching LSS, maybe a suspicious scheduled task. Useful, except it doesn't tell you the blast started with a fish, escalated through a consent grant, then pivoted to SharePoint with a live browser token. Without SaaS and identity context, you're treating symptoms. The infection lives upstream. Here's what most people miss. EDR alerts are often the middle of the movie. The opening scene is the user clicking accept on a too-friendly app. The ending is data walking out through cloud APIs, while your agent congratulates itself for killing a DLL. In a silo, you close the EDR ticket and celebrate. Meanwhile, the attacker reuses the token on a different machine with the same identity, and your logs look normal. Defender XDR drags the whole plot into one window. The unified incident graph ties process events to the user, the token, the mailbox rules, and the cloud sessions. That unsigned binary, you see it on the same timeline as the risky sign-in, the graph calls, and the team's file access. Now you know if the endpoint event is a fire or just smoke from a fire that already moved upstairs. Here's the counterintuitive part. Sometimes the right move isn't to keep hammering the endpoint. It's to cut the oxygen at identity and SaaS first. With XDR, Auto IR can revoke refresh tokens, kill active sessions, and revoke a shady OAuth grant before you even finish reading the process tree. Then you contain the device. Order matters. You stop the reinfection loop by breaking the session state, not just deleting the executable. Specific example you'll recognize. EDR flags office spawning PowerShell with encoded commands. In isolation, you block, isolate, scan. But in XDR, that event correlates with yesterday's Calendar Helper 365 consent and a sudden spike in SharePoint download activity. That's not a drive-by macro. That's an established persistence channel. From the same incident pane, you revoke consent, kill sessions, roll back mailbox rules, and quarantine the files that left the machine. The device goes into containment while identity gets cleaned. One pass, no swivel chair. Think of EDR only like listening to footsteps in one hallway. You hear noise, you chase it, you silence it, but the burglar is using the elevator and the roof access you never monitored. Defender XDR hands you the floor plan and the elevator controls. So you don't sprint room to room. You lock floors, stop the lift, then clear the hall. ROI shows up fast. Cross-domain correlation means fewer critical device alerts that are actually benign without identity anomalies. Your queue shrinks because the platform dedupes the same root cause across 10 machines into one incident. And audits stop asking for screenshots from 6 consoles. The incident record already shows token revocations, session kills, device containment, and file governance in sequence. Clean endpoint. Dirty identity was yesterday's headache. With Defender XDR, you clean both in order so it stays clean. Endpoints aren't islands. They're bridges. Close the bridge at both ends and the attacker finally runs out of road. Blind spot 4. Cloud apps, SaaS and shadow it, without endpoint identity linkage. Now the highway. Cloud apps. SaaS is where your data actually lives and where shadow IT multiplies like rabbits the minute finance discovers a freemium export button. You think you're watching it because your TSB spits out OAuth alerts and file shares. Except it's yelling into a void if it can't touch identity and devices. That's how exfil happens at noon while everyone's staring at a green dashboard. Here's what most people miss. CASB alone sees the permission, not the person. It flags high-risk OAuth grant, but doesn't know the token came from a machine with a sketchy browser extension and an unsigned binary at logon. It sees unusual download rate from SharePoint, but can't tell you it started 5 minutes after a phish and coincided with a refresh token mint. You end up writing a stern email about responsible app usage while data walks out through graph politely with keys you issued. Okay, so basically cloud telemetry without identity and endpoint context is a funhouse mirror. The simple version is you need to tie app sessions to the user, the device posture, and the identity session state in one incident. Defender XDR does that because Defender for Cloud Apps lives inside the same incident graph. OAuth consent, session governance, file activity, they're not separate alerts. They're nodes on the same chain with the token, the sign-in, and the process tree. Here's the weird part. The fastest win in cloud security isn't another discovery scan. It's response in the right order. With Defender XDR, you can revoke the malicious app consent, kill active sessions, and, if the source device is dirty, isolate it, all from the incident pane. Then quarantine or label the files that already left. You don't draft a ticket for 3 teams. You pull the plug in one place. Specific example. A time tracking app asks for offline access and files. Read write to all. In a silo, CASB flags it. Someone promises to review, and nothing changes. In XDR, that consent is linked to last night's odd sign-in and a device running an unsigned helper in the user profile. AutoIR suggests revoke consent, kill sessions, mark the user risky, and contain the device. You click Approve. The faucet closes before you debate the app's business value. Shadow IT, same story. A user wires up a third-party storage connector to export monthly reports. In isolation, it's productivity. In XDR, you see it correlates with abnormal download spikes and a browser token lifted from a machine with a bad extension. You revoke the connector's token, enforce session controls, and quarantine the exported files pending review. No swivel chair, no hunting for which admin portal owns the problem. Think of CASB only, like watching the loading dock with no badge list and no camera on the hallway. You see boxes leaving. You don't know who carried them or if they had keys. Defender XDR gives you the badge list, the hallway camera, and the lock controls. You don't log the theft, you stop it live. ROI shows up as fewer connectors, saner training, and audits that stop chewing your weekends. One platform, one incident record. OAuth grants documented, sessions killed, devices contained, files governed with timestamps. Tool sprawl goes down, so does your blood pressure. The ROI equation, consolidation beats complexity, proof and payback. Here's the boring math that actually decides budgets. Tool sprawl burns money in 3 places: people, plumbing, and panic. Defender XDR pays back by collapsing all 3. People, one console, one incident story. Analysts stop copy-pasting across vendors and start closing cases. Alert dedupe and correlation cut the queue. AutoIR handles the muscle memory. Lean teams suddenly look staffed. Plumbing. Native Microsoft integrations mean fewer connectors stitched together with 3 scripts and a prayer. Less maintenance. Faster onboarding. Training shrinks from 6 products to 1 stack. Panic. When an incident already shows the causal chain and offers actions. Revoke tokens, kill sessions, isolate device, roll back mailbox rules. You shrink response time and blast radius. That's real money. Missed breaches cost more than licenses. Every time. If you're already paying for Microsoft 365 and Azure, you're halfway there. Consolidation removes duplicate licenses, CM gymnastics for basics, and the weekly scavenger hunt for audit artifacts. Typical payback lives in the 12 to 18-month window. Not heroic, just cause and effect. The expense to savings switch flips on native cross-domain incident correlation. One timeline replaces 4 tickets and 3 meetings. That's the dividend. Handling objections without the drama. Counter-arguments resolved. Vendor lock-in. Sure, you're already locked into M365 for identities, mail, and files. Native beats glue code. XDR still feeds Sentinel or Splunk for compliance and forensics. We have a SIEM. Great, keep it. Let XDR do real-time detection and response. Stop forcing SIEM to impersonate an EDR plus KSB plus SOAR. Too complex. Complexity is the silos. Pre-built connectors, one console, auto IR with approvals. Fewer moving parts. We'll lose control. Automation is policy-bound. You choose what auto-executes and what asks first. We can't afford it. You're already paying alert fatigue, staffing churn, breach cleanup, audit overtime, consolidation trims the mess and the bill. The mandatory correction, hybrid security fails when your tools don't talk. Defender XDR forces one incident language with one timeline and cross-domain actions. That's the fix. If you want compliance depth without giving up real-time speed, watch the breakdown on wiring Defender XDR into your SIEM, Sentinel, Splunk, whatever you already run. Subscribe so you don't get stuck rebuilding the same wet cardboard stack next quarter. Pick structure over entropy now.